I want to introduce and welcome author Spike Carlsen. Spike has written 6 books on the topic of woodworking, and building. He's a former executive editor of Family Handyman magazine and has written for the Wall Street Journal, Men's Health, and many other publications. Now, Spike's newest book is titled A Walk Around the Block, Stoplight Secrets, Mischievous Squirrels, Manhole Mysteries, and other stuff you see every day and know nothing about. Spike, welcome to Weekly Walking Tips and Inspiration, and thank you for being the first guest on the show.
No, it's an honor to be that and to be with you.
Oh, thank you. All right. So you've written 6 prior books, all about woodworking, building. How do you get into walking from there? How does that?
Well, I've always been, kind of the curious type. I was the kid who took the lawnmower apart to try to make a go-kart when they were, when I was a kid. So I've always been interested in how things work. When I was with Family Handyman magazine, I was there for 15 years. I used to write a book called, or a segment called How a House Works. And that was kind of how things within a house worked. Your plumbing, your electricity, your framing and that type of thing. So that got me thinking on a smaller scale and writing about it, in addition to writing about, how to fix your toilet and how to build a deck and that kind of thing. And so this just kind of, gradually morphed into a book on a larger scale of things, the infrastructure around us. So it wasn't a direct line from point A to point B, but it went from A to B to C to D.
Right. So was there like that light bulb moment where like you described it gradual, but was it where you said, "Ooh, this is something I can."
Yeah, it was. Like I say, I'd always thought it would be fun to do something on. I hate to use the word infrastructure because it's such a stodgy, put off type word, but I always thought it'd be fun to do something about how electricity and water get into people's homes and how trash and recycling go out, and then other things that might go along with it, like streets and sidewalks and the telephone poles and things like that. But somewhere you have to have the glue to hold all this stuff together, and the glue seemed to be logical to do a walk, what it would be, a drive through the city, a bike ride through the neighborhood. Hey, how about a walk around the block? And so that's really kind of the glue that holds this whole piece together. The block is a very big block. It extends from San Francisco to Ardmore, Alabama to Paris. But it's that's kind of the glue that holds all this stuff together.
Yeah. So before writing this, you mentioned going through the different biking and driving. Were you a walker? Did you walk?
Yeah, I've always been a huge biker, and but I've also liked to walk. My wife and I do a lot of walking. One thing that kind of changed the way I walk is over the course of this book, I interviewed and walked with Linda Lemke, the Nordic Walking queen. And, Nordic Walking is with poles and a certain technique. And when I was done with that interview, I bought a set of Nordic Walking poles. You know this better than I do. You're a runner guy, but I think when you just walk, you use about 60% of your muscles. With Nordic Walking, I've heard you use 90% of your muscles.
Because now you've got that upper body.
Yeah,
that is even if you don't use the poles, even doing that, I don't do that because it's a workout. It's a hard work. I do other body weight exercise, but that is a tough workout. So so the walking was was it part of the process of like putting this together? I find when I'm I walk a lot, but when I'm in the middle of something like that I'm preparing for, kind of that takes the back seat. How did the walking, were you like, hey, I got to get out and walk and figure stuff out?
Yeah, it was just it was just part of the whole package. If it was called a walk around the block, I felt I couldn't just talk about, fire hydrants and lawns and streets and things like that. And the more I got into the walking section, the more I realized how much there was to it. I spent a weekend in Salinas, California with Dan Burden of the Blue Zones,
Mhm.
who was working with the city and a bunch of activists on how to make that city more walkable.
Mm.
And so that was really intriguing to me, how you can make peninsulas bulb out so crosswalks for pedestrians are more friendly, making wider sidewalks, making points of interest along the way. Just even the way you build your city in terms of multi-use housing versus segmenting things to make them unwalkable. So that turned me on to the whole concept of what we can do about our built environment to make walking more friendly. And then along the way, I just picked up on the health benefits, the social benefits, the psychological benefits of walking.
Wow. You hit upon everything that I've been preaching on my website, and now I want to bring to YouTube. So that's fantastic. Of all of this, what was the most interesting thing you found out about? Like something that you didn't know, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that was fascinating.
Yeah, I met some interesting people, and interesting in different respects. In terms of someone who I think makes a large impact on the world, it was interviewing Bea Johnson in my sections on trash and recycling. And she's a woman in San Francisco, kind of the founder of the Zero Waste Home. And she fits all of the trash for her family of four into a 1-quart jar. And someone like that is pretty inspirational.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that, but
Yeah.
she sure gets you thinking about about reducing, so you're not wheeling a 32-gallon jug of trash down to the corner every weekend.
I did two of those this morning.
Yeah, so in terms of impact on my life, she was really an interesting person. Another person who was interesting and just kind of paving her own way was Heather Montgomery, who I interviewed on a section on roadkill. And it sounds like a very bizarre topic to cover, but it's something you encounter in your walk around the block. But she uses roadkill as a way of teaching anatomy to grade school kids. And, she has a whole collection of roadkill skeletons. She really opened my eyes to, to teaching, to kind of taking a different view at the world. And, so she was interesting in yet another aspect of the project.
Interesting. Now, you've traveled far and wide. You mentioned going from San Francisco to Paris. Wide variety of people. Who was out of that the most interesting? Was it the 1-quart woman? Was it anyone else?
Well, it was when I was in Paris. When you do a book like this, a nonfiction book, you need to write a proposal and you need to write 3 sample chapters. And the 3 sample chapters I picked were graffiti and sewers and one other one. And so when I was in Paris, I was working on the graffiti chapter, and I had arranged to meet a graffiti artist named Urban just to interview him. And when he arrived, he just said, "Come on, let's go paint." And so instead of sitting down with a tape recorder and interviewing him, we went back to a back alley and we painted for a couple of hours. And he was so willing to share his information. And over the course of that couple hours, it covered everything I wanted to cover and more. And just being hands-on on something like that was fantastic. I took, before that, I took a walking tour on graffiti on Paris, and it just that whole concept of graffiti. Is it art? Is it vandalism? It really kind of helped elucidate that for me.
So I got next follow up. Was it legal to do what you were doing?
Yeah, it wasn't. But if you go to jail, that's a good part of the story too.
I was going to say, yeah, that's the best part. I just real quick, the Beatles, when they did their rooftop concert, Paul McCartney talked about it, and he was hoping at the end the cops would arrest him after they said you can't do this anymore. He said they didn't, and so it just kind of ended. So that would have been a great part of the story. So in doing this book, researching it, how long did it take you from the concept and you talked about the proposal to finishing it? How long does that take?
Yeah, it was about a 2-year process.
Wow.
And I have an agent in New York, and there were about 20 publishing houses that turned down the idea. And HarperCollins, who I did my first book with, picked it up and ran with it. And so, the whole process is, writing a proposal takes several months, kind of getting the okay takes a few months, and then you kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the writing. Then there's the copy editing, the fact checking, all that good stuff. So it's a 2-year project from start to finish.
Wow. Okay. So, well, that's it. So I had a list of questions, but I'm going to jump around because of what you just said. So, I mean, 2-year process, that's a huge commitment, and just the stick to itness to see this through. So, I have a class, I'm a teacher, and I have them write a book. It's about a 20-page thing on how to do something. What would you tell a new writer or someone who has a blog out there, and like, how do they take it from something that they enjoy doing to maybe doing it full time? Like when something takes this long, what advice would you give them about sticking with it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to write about something that and you're passionate about. Excuse me. And I think a good approach is to start doing some freelance writing. If you don't get many nibbles on your freelance writing, that might be a clue that you're not onto the right topic.
Okay.
But there's so many, even starting with your hometown newspaper, and then moving on to local magazines and more national magazines. I think those are really good ways of testing the waters. And like I say, if you're not getting any nibbles or any much feedback, you might want to take a little bit different approach to what you're writing about, how you're writing about it, whether you're having other people look at your writing, beforehand, and to just really, kind of use your own voice, but also know that writing is a business, and you got to be rigorous about it. You have to be professional about it if you're going to do it for a living.
Just to get to that full time. Okay, so we're on the writing. I'd like to talk to you more about that, because that fascinates me. People who write, who just sit and like, hey, I got this idea and here it is. And so like, what is your, I'll use the word process, but like, you wake up in the morning, are you writing every day? Like, what's your day like as far as writing?
Yeah, you have to write every day. And a book like this, I probably did at least 100 interviews, and probably 20 or 25 what I'd call field trips, where you're going out and touring sewage treatment plants or electrical plants. And so you have to, be pretty disciplined. You have to plan ahead. I'm in my studio right now. Here it is. It's a little loft above the garage.
Okay.
And I try to sit down and work about 3 or 4 hours in the morning, and then take a break, sometimes go for a walk.
Ah, nice.
Clear the head, come up with some ideas, and then maybe work another hour or two. It's hard to have a real set schedule because you're dependent on when other people are available for interviews. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit dependent on when inspiration will strike. But once you have a deadline, it really you really gotta stick with it.
Yeah. It's so we try to play. It's always that deadline that gets me moving.
Yeah.
So you walk out when you write. Do you listen to music or anything?
I don't.
Like, do you have a special like set of your home office? Is there any set like music you listen to? Type of music?
Yeah, I don't, because it distracts me. Okay. It's in the same way that fountains distract me.
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
interesting. Okay.
it's just there's just something about it that prevents me from focusing totally on the writing part of it.
Oh,
And I don't have the split brain where I can multitask when I write. So I'm kind of a quiet person. And I also have a personality when I write, I go really deep into a subject. And if I'm interrupted, I've got to climb all the way out of the hole and talk to someone, answer their question. Then I got to dive way back in again, and that's time consuming. So my wife is very tolerant of my writing habits. We have 5 kids. We've got 9 grandkids, and sometimes you just have to say, this is my time for writing, and then when you're done, you're done.
you're done. Ah, interesting. All right. So let's get back to the book and a walk around the block. What's where you walk? What's your block like? What's around your block and where do you walk?
Yeah, good question. We live in the oldest house in the oldest city in Minnesota. So the town
Wow.
is called Stillwater, Minnesota. And our house is about 170 years old. It was built in 1850. And so it's a very interesting town to walk around. It's a river town. It's a tourist town. There's a lot of great architecture. There's a lot of great hills. um, there's a thing in Stillwater, a kind of a thing to do, and it's called doing the steps. And there's 4 sets of steps in Stillwater, and each set is maybe 150 to 200 steps because it's a very hilly area. So you see a lot of people uh, doing the steps. And there's one place where it says, doing these steps 110 times is equivalent to climbing Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but anyway, it's a very interesting town to walk around, and I think having interesting things to look at really uh, helps walking. We can walk to an ice cream parlor 4 blocks away. There's a new biking and walking loop that's about 5 miles long. It's a town that's really given some thought to biking and to walking and to make those interesting.
Yeah, wow. So you're in Minnesota, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. What happens in the winter time there? How is walking around in the winter? Because my idea of Minnesota in the winter is cold. Is
Yeah,
it?
you're right. You're right. I mean,
Well, your book started with the frozen pipes.
right,
That's
exactly.
how cold it is there.
Yeah, and walking is just we don't walk when it's dangerous out. And I have a exercise bike and we have a treadmill and things like that. But still, there's something about fresh air, getting out and giving a wave to people that there's nothing else like it. So we just get out there and walk, whenever we can.
Fantastic. So that would lead me into this for people watching this who aren't walkers, who are the non-walker right now, and we're trying to convert them. What advice would you give them about starting?
Yeah, I would just say, working with Linda Lemke, the Nordic Walking queen, who's into Nordic walking, just talks about how she uses walking she's used it for rehabilitating, people recovering from leg injuries and things like that. And she talks about one guy who all he could do was walk from bench to bench around the lake. He could walk about 100 yards and then take a seat. And then eventually he could, skip a bench, and eventually he could walk around the whole lake. And so I think that's the beauty of walking. You don't really need any special equipment except for good shoes. And there's even people who walk barefoot, and you can do it any time of day. It's a real social thing. I think there's a milestone, and I'm not sure it's backed by scientific information, that 10,000 steps a day is what you need to maintain good health. And then there's different paces and things like that people recommend. But I just think it's something that anyone can do. And if you can only get 10 steps one day and you get 11 the next day, by the end of the year you're going to be walking around the block.
Absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's such a great concept. I love this. Do you see doing a follow-up to this? I mean, 2-year process is a long time, but there's a lot more to the world, I'm sure, than you couldn't cram it
Yeah.
all in. Any thought of a follow-up?
Yeah, well, since my background is construction, I was in construction for 15 years. I thought something along the lines of a stroll around the house would be
Okay.
interesting. What are granite countertops? What's really sheetrock? What's the deal about different qualities of paint? So that would be kind of a natural progression. I'm also really interested in watches, and there's watchmaking competitions where you have the big boys like Rolex that go against individuals that might be making only 2 or 3 watches a year. And I just think that would be a fascinating look at the history of watches, kind of the culture behind watches. There's something about watches that just intrigues me. About the time that this contract came up, my wife sold her business, and we had plans to travel and things like that. And so this book kind of got in the way of that a little bit. And so we're another big project is just spending more time with my wife, and we'll probably spend a fair amount of that time walking.
Yeah, yeah. That's the most important topic, your wife. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you'd like to say to my viewers here on my show?
Well, there were a couple of unexpected things that came out of the book. And one was that I talked with, I went to power plants and recycling centers, and I walked the mail route with our mail carrier. And in this day and age, we hear so much about essential workers, frontline health workers, and things like that. And they are really frontline. But I think sometimes we forget about the other essential workers, the people that pick up our trash, the people that, there's no on-off switch at the water plant or sewage treatment plant. And these are people who I think sometimes get overlooked in terms of essential people. And the other thing I began realizing just walking around the block is there's so many things people can do on a grassroots level. National politics has been so much in the forefront these days, and there's so much we can do on a local level to make our lives better, whether it's advocating for, walking paths in our town, safer walking, whether it's advocating for increasing, recycling, planting trees. I've been a big advocate of working with wood and trees, but the environmental benefits of that. So, no matter which way you go with your politics, regardless of that, there's just so much people can do on a local level to make their lives better, to improve the planet, to be happier. And so those were a couple things. I didn't go into writing the book with those agendas in mind, but when I was done, there were kind of some realizations that came to light.
Yeah, wow. It's something when you do a project that is eye-opening like that,
Yeah.
fantastic. So where can people find you and your book?
My website is spikecarlsen.com, and Carlsen is spelt with an SEN.
SEN, okay.
And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me by putting in those words. And the book can be found really anywhere,
Oh,
through Amazon, independent bookstores. We've had really good publicity on this thing. We wound up on the Today Show and some other shows, and so the book's having a nice run, so to speak. And eventually it'll slow down to a walk, but we're just enjoying the ride while we can.
I love the fun. Thank you. And last question, last one. The name Spike, is it your given name or is it a nickname or is it a mystery
Yeah, no,
of
it's a
your
nickname. When I worked with the magazine, the editor didn't want any two people to have the same first name to avoid confusion. And I was I used to love to play volleyball, and I was a carpenter, so you'd spike the ball, and I was a carpenter, and you'd drive spikes into the wood. And so I became Spike. And at one point there was a Butch, a Rocky, and a Mac that all worked at the magazine. Everyone wound up with a nickname. And, we all sound kind of like a biker gang, and we're all pretty mild-mannered folks. But that's the story behind Spike. So
that's a great way to end this. Thank you. So Spike, thank you for taking the time to talk to my audience. And again, for being the first guest on Weekly Walking Tips and Inspiration. Here's to making a walk around the block a huge success. Thank you again, Spike.
Thank you, and I hope that your new endeavor is a great success.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right.